Let me just give you some background on this story. I was young, maybe 8, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I am now 16 at the time. I didn't know what a Wendy was, but I am confident I had an encounter with me and 2 friends, who I will call. J and T were at my friend Jay's house. He lives near an Indian reservation, but we were kids, so we messed around a lot. I was a year younger than my friends. T was about a year older than the rest of us. We had been playing in the woods behind Jay's house all day. He had a cave-like area away in the woods, and we were shooting fireworks and playing with knives. Yes, I know, very smart. We were playing in the cave and we heard a noise that was like an ear-curling scream. Jay said he had never heard it before, and T said we should go back to Jay's. So we made our way back slowly, and as we did, we heard something big lurking in the woods. I was a Bigfoot believer at the time and said it was probably a Sasquatch, and if we keep going it would leave us alone, so we ignored it. We got back to the house and had time to forget about the encounter. We told ourselves that it was probably a deer because there are not many bears in Alabama. So anyway, we were bored and wanted to play hide-and-seeker in the dark, so we started to head out the door. We quickly stopped dead in our tracks that we saw something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. It was like a bear, but it had antlers on its head and was on all 4s. We panicked, slammed the door, and locked it. We moved to my friend's window, and when we pulled back the blinds, it was looking at us. It stood up on its back, 2 legs. It was close to 8 feet tall. In 5 strides, it went from his driveway to the field down the road that was probably 150 feet away, and we have never seen it again. We still don't like to talk about it to this day, and now that we know what Wendigos are, we think it's one of those. And we won't go into those woods alone ever again. I am a female, and when this story took place, I was around 19 years old. I believe I will also mention that it was 2002, so I did not have a cell phone at the time. I was driving from a friend's cabin in Northern California down a very dangerous curvy canyon road in the mountains. It was around midnight when my car started acting weird and all of a sudden just died. I was able to get off on this tiny shoulder, so I was not in the middle of the road. I kept trying to get it to start, but every time I turned the key it would make a loud screeching sound. I figured I was just making it worse, so I stopped. Great. It was completely dark, very late, and I was alone in the middle of nowhere. Literally. I had not seen a single car since I had left. As I peered out my window, I had a very uneasy feeling come over me, and I decided at that point I was not getting out of my car until daylight. I locked my doors. There's no telling what is out there at night. There's mountain lion, Sasquatch, or worse. When it got to daylight, I would set out on foot to find a phone. It was going to be a long night. With that said, I gathered up some of my stuff and rolled a joint. I was about halfway through my smoke session and I almost fell asleep when all of a sudden I saw lights. I could see way across the canyon headlights coming down the winding road. They could not see me as my lights were off. I knew I had about 3 or 4 minutes until they came around the last curve and I would be completely visible. I didn't like the way this was playing out. And even though I had told myself earlier that I was not getting out of the car at that moment, I decided I was getting out. I was going to hide somewhere until the car passed. I grabbed my keys, flashlight, and wallet, locked my door, and took off, running into the night using only the moonlight to see. I ran across the road about 75 feet away from my car and hid behind a tree that was behind a guardrail behind me. Somewhere, probably close, was a straight drop-off into a canyon off the side of the mountain, so I had limited options of where to hide. The car was approaching mine now, and I squatted there as I watched it slowly come to a stop. Great. I know most people would be happy to see it pass her by, but I had a bad feeling that night and would have much rather just waited till daylight to take care of myself. Call me stubborn and paranoid, but I think it saved my life that night. I was hoping that when the person saw that my car was empty, they would just leave, but they did not. The door of the truck opened and I could see a tall man walking over to my car. When he got close to it, he started moving his head all around like he was looking for something. He was probably looking for me. I was physically shaking and really whisking that I had not smoked so much of that joint earlier. The tall man tried to open the driver's side door, and when it didn't open, he started banging on the window like he was trying to break it. I started to cry. I didn't know what he was going to do. When he finally stopped, He began pacing all around the road, yelling at me to come out. He yelled for probably a full minute, just walked away, back over to my car, punched the hood and got back into his vehicle and slowly drove away. I was so scared that he was hiding just out of view, waiting for me to come out, that I hid in the exact same spot until the sun came up. What was weird about this man is when I noticed him walking across the street, is that it looked like he had horns on his head, like similar to what you would see on a deer or an elk. He was also incredibly tall, as I mentioned, easily 7 foot tall, and looked very gangly and very thin. I decided to go back to my car for just a minute to see if I could get to start, and thank God I did, because when the sun came up, I was ready to go after being sat behind that tree for so many hours. My foot must have already been on the gas pedal because I screeched my tires. As I got the hell out of there, I cannot believe what just happened. I called the police and made a report, and when I finally got home, nothing ever came of it. I'm not sure if that was some creepy guy with a costume on or something worse. It kind of reminds me of Jeer's Creepers a bit, how that monster or creature or whatever it was drove around a vehicle. Has anybody ever heard of a Wendy or a Skinwalker driving? Let me know in the comments. I wanted to share a true event that happened to me a few months back, but I haven't been able to make head or tails of what truly happened. Maybe you or one of your viewers could give me some sort of idea of what I encountered. So here's some background. I live in the Adirondack Mountain foothills area of upstate New York. This area is also famous for some revolutionary battles that occurred, and it was home to Native Americans, as well as Bernie Hatch, who was a notorious murderer that had victims' bodies up where I live. No joke, Google the Potato Hill murder. So these foothills of the Adirondack Mountains are covered in dirt roads called fire lanes. But a lot of people go mud blogging and have little fires up there. However, I always walked and hiked these trails since I was a mere child. And now I hike with my trusty yellow lab who was retired from hunting. Sam is his name. It was the middle of June, and Sam and I were hiking and traveling up this dirt road to see dark, dense valley below. The weather was cloudy and a small wind picked up. I was studying fungi and was looking for a puffball fungi to cook. Later, when a weird gust of air hit me and set off my flight or fight senses, it was kind of strange. It got oddly quiet and one side of the forest shifted to the other side. What I mean is squirrels, chipmunks, birds of every type, deer, and even a few wild weasels of sorts were running into the opposite side of the forest, crossing the dirt road altogether, like they were all being chased by something huge where I was standing. I was on top of a valley looking down into the gold, show the side of a dirt road. I stood up and I stared at my dog. Sam, who was hacking all of his hair, was standing up straight on his back while staring into the dense forest that was also strangely dark, as if a storm cloud had rolled in. Sam started to take defense and bowed down, growling hair, still standing on his point. That's when I realized the air smelled pungent, as if a deer carcass was bloated right next to me. At first I thought it was a bear, but then I kept hearing mumbling like people were talking to each other, followed by a heavy growl. I heard a small voice whimpering like, "Help me." Wait, do you see me? I am a vein technician at a local hospital and love helping people in need, but something just wasn't right about this voice. I just stood there, almost mesmerized by the whispering when Sam snatched me out of it. I was in this weird trance and he bit my hand hard to the point that it almost drew blood before he started running up the road towards home. As I started running after him, he stopped and turned around to let me run past him and let out a few more blood-curdling howls that this dog has never made in his life. I locked all the windows and doors and grabbed my pistol, but everything seemed at peace at home, with the sun out, tut. But every time I would go near the door, Sam would go crazy nipping at my hand and his whimper would turn into a growl which in all the years I've raised to me has never, ever bit me, nipped, or even howled. Do you have any clue what it is I could have run into still bothers me to this day? I am utterly terrified at this very moment. I'm not home alone, but my brother is dead asleep and nothing can wake him up. Not even loud music. I will first explain what happened to me last night, and then I will begin with what's happening right now. I was in this weird trance and he bit my hand hard to the point that it almost drew blood before he started running up the road towards home. As I started running after him, he stopped and turned around to let me run past him and let out a few more blood-curdling howls that this dog has never made in his life. I locked all the windows and doors and grabbed my pistol, but everything seemed at peace at home, with the sun out, tut, but every time I would go near the door, Sam would go crazy nipping at my hand and his whimper would turn into a growl which in all the years I've raised to me has never, ever bit me, nipped, or even howled. Do you have any clue what it is I could have run into still bothers me to this day? I am utterly terrified at this very moment. I'm not home alone, but my brother is dead asleep and nothing can wake him up. Not even loud music. I will first explain what happened to me last night, and then I will begin with what's happening right now. I'm only 15. I'm an Australian and I fear I have a Skinwalker stalking or taunting me. And before I start, I know that Skinwalker are supposed to only be in America, but I do not believe they are only there. I really do believe there is one here. Last night I went to bed normally at 8 p.m., scared and terrified for absolutely no reason. I woke up 5 times from what I can remember. The first time I woke up after a happy dream in a cold sweat, absolutely terrified, scared, and paralyzed. I fell asleep from fear. I'm pretty sure the second time I don't really remember. I just remember waking up still feeling absolutely terrified and in a sweat. The third time I was terrified. Still. I wanted to prove to myself that it was nothing and I was just being an idiot. I sat up and I smelled like I had just run a marathon. I did not care. I got up looking for my dog, Choppy. He is an English Mastiff. He must have sensed that I was terrified or something because I couldn't find him where he usually was on the couch. He was on my floor laying there, staring out. My door completely focused on something. This scared me even more and I just went straight back to bed. I turned on my phone and realized it was around 3 in the morning. I turned it off and just rolled onto my side and looked at my door until I fell asleep. The previous 2 times I remember just doing the same thing, waking up and sitting up with absolute dread and terror. I kept looking and making sure my dog was still there. I made him sleep on the bed with me the last time that I woke up. I told my mom, and she just shrugged off the whole thing as me being restless. She is a very skeptical person. I've never had sleeping problems. I have never ever in my life woken up with fear, terror, or even sweat. I will now explain what's happening right now. I live in Queensland. I'm not giving my exact location. My parents aren't home because my mom has to pick up my dad from the airport tonight as he works in Washington and gets to fly home every month. I am basically home alone. I don't even want to call out for my brother to see if I can wake him up, so I'm sitting there in silence, only listening to the taps of my fingers on the keyboard, trying to calm myself. And I am scared that even if I leave my seat to do anything, something will come through my back door after me. My parents are coming around, maybe 2 a.m. Tonight, and presently it's only around 8 p.m. I'm about to cry. My late evening has consisted of cleaning. I like cleaning as it helps me get my mind off of things. I was finishing out the dishes when I heard the dog whimper. It did not sound like any of my dogs, but I checked anyway. Maybe it was Chopper or one of the other 3. So I went to make sure that they were okay. Choppy was sleeping and the other 3 were all asleep as well. I went outside to make sure there wasn't a dog or anything, and there was nothing there. This was really odd, but I thought nothing of it and just tried to play it out as if they were dreaming or something. I do not think it was them. I could still feel eyes on me. At this point, I could feel the dread, terror, and everything in me. But I am trying to show that I am calm and relaxed. I don't know if it is working. Something is out there. I can hear it walking, going through our trash. I heard it burp or something. It did not sound like anything I have ever heard. Would you not have dingoes in this area? Nor do we have any wild or stray dogs that I know of anyway. It keeps growling or trying to talk whatever it's doing. I am not complying with it. I'm going to stay planted in my seat. Plus, I do not think with how I am trembling, I could even walk towards it. Yes, I am that scared. I keep glancing at my glass sliding door and my kitchen window every 5 seconds. I do not want to move. I'm literally shaking. I feel its eyes are on me now, and I can hear something is going through the trash. I have the back door open. I had it open so Choppy could enter and leave freely. He looks terrified. He went out there and he was barking and growling at whatever it was. So were the other 3 dogs. He came in and the other dogs just went dead silent. He's sitting on the couch just looking out the kitchen window. We both give each other glances, even if he is just a dog. We are both looking at each other as if though that we don't know what to do. Or we're looking at each other like with what the heck kinda look. I'm going to keep updating people, but before I post this, I'm just going to say whatever it is. It stinks like rotten eggs, dead rotting animals, sin, rotten milk or yogurt all at the same time. It is horrid. I'm sorry if this is scrat out of place. I'm just so terrified and hoping that your show can maybe spread some light on this. After last night, I'm a believer that skin whalers exist and still roam freely. I'm still terrified of what I saw, and I wasn't the only one that witnessed it. My girlfriend and I had just gotten into our vehicle, and we were about to head out for a drink at around 10:30 p.m. Now, before I continue, I want to paint a little picture of our surroundings, but I don't want to give much information about any specific location or anything like that. Just to be safe. I will say we are staying in public lodging in Montana on a hiking trip. Our vehicle is in a fairly vacant lot with a 12-inch fence. We had just gotten into our car, as I said before, and I turned the vehicle on. The automatic lights flipped on, revealing what I immediately knew had to be a Skywalker. It sprung forward from its previous sitting position and ran about 3 very fast steps before leaping over his fence. Its body scared the heck out of me. It had light tanned skin, but it was very spindly, think Slender Man built, but it was only about 6 or 7 feet tall. Its arms were along with thin, long fingers that looked almost like claws. The head had a human shape to it. It turned to look at us for a brief moment, and there was no light refrain from his eyes. Nothing, just black. It all happened in less than 5 seconds. I turned toward my girlfriend, hoping I didn't see what I just saw. She sat there, staring at the fence and could only whisper drive. I couldn't move. I kept saying that was a Skinwalker. She finally was able to turn towards me and basically scream at me to drive. I got us the heck out of there and we proceeded to go through the bar and drink away. Our worries refusing to talk about it, we got her ride back and got her vehicle in the morning. By the way, she still won't talk to me about it. I think according to legends, you're not supposed to talk about it. I know proving this stuff is really hard without pictures, but I swear on my honor as a man that I'm not making this up or exaggerating anything should we just leave the area. I don't know, this was only last night. Feel free to ask questions or give advice because I'm not sure what to do next. Before I start, I should mention that I am half white, half Mexican male, and this story happened to me when I was 17 years old. My family went to California for a summer vacation and to see the family we have out there. That year, we decided to go camping in a certain park in Northern California for a few days, and being a Phoenix native, it was a much-needed break from the 120-degree heat. All was good for the first few days until the second to last night. There, a group of 5 to 6 of us were sitting by the campfire at 1 in the morning when we noticed the forest goes dead, silent around us as we all look around at each other questioning. We hear the pained, blood-curdling scream of a woman saying, "No, no, 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 no." Bring from the trees to the left of our camp. Not knowing what was wrong or what was going on, we kept our ears open and stayed on guard. A few moments later, we hear the same noise again, but somehow different. More inhuman this time, like a voice being played off of a speaker. We instantly recognize it as a voice of the woman from before. Horrified, we quietly all went to our tents to hide. Eventually, we all fell into a very uneasy sleep. I joked it awake at 3 in the morning, desperately needing to pee. Thankfully, we were across from the outhouses, so after a quick sprint over into the outhouses and relieving myself, I hear what sounded like scratching on a tin metal roof. I immediately froze, remembering the inhuman howl from earlier that night, hoping they weren't related. Armed with only my phone, I watched the next half an hour tick down, either waiting for the sun to rise or for the sound of the scraping to stop. Suddenly, the light in the bathroom cut out the timer for the lights had gone out, leaving me in the dark with the faintest bit of light. Foolishly, I turned around and perked on the metal roof. I saw was a 7-foot pale gray creature with 3-inch claws on all fours and deep sunken eyes staring at me a mere 25 feet away. It was frozen solid as we looked at each other until it took to its right and saw the light creeping up. It stared at me and let out one more agonizing cry that had me haunted till this very day. It sent one last soul-stabbing stare before it vanished into the early morning. As I lay back into my tent, silently sobbing and trying to fall back asleep, I hear the faint echo of the thing's cry. Needless to say, I didn't sleep at all that night and refused to set foot in those woods again. As we left the campsite that day, we saw a homeless-looking woman standing at the side of the road going down the mountain. I didn't make eye contact, but I knew she was staring at me. Once we passed, I casually looked over my shoulder to see if she was there, and she wasn't. But there was an owl who flew close to the ground to where she was. Okay, so a little backstory. I'm part Abajo. My grandparents on my mother's side lived in Arizona, and my grandmother used to tell me about skin whalers. When I was little, my mom relocated to Indiana for college and met my father. I used to go out to visit my grandparents every summer for a week or so with my mom. I never really experienced anything because I was around 12 when I stopped going to visit them. And then a couple of years later, they moved here to Indiana when I was around 16 to be closer to us. My grandparents said that they experienced some things when they lived out there, but they won't talk about their experiences in the last few months. I become sort of obsessed with learning about them. And my current job is pretty boring, and I have a lot of free time to sit and think. I've heard from my grandparents that if you think about them, it draws them to you. I don't know if they are prominent in the Midwest, but upon researching them, I have found a lot of people who've had experiences here for some reason. The last few days, the only thing I've been able to think about has been Skinwalker, and if he'll ever see one granted. I hope I don't. My grandma told me to stop thinking about them because it can draw you closer to them. I'm just wondering if there is some truth to this I know to reach because they mainly exist in the southeast. But with me having Navajo blood, it just makes me curious. I have periodic dreams or nightmares about them as well. It seems every night it gets closer and closer to my window, just looking at me with these yellow glowing eyes. I'm not sure if this is a premonition or just me being too obsessed with something, but I hope this isn't some sort of mind game a Skywalker is playing with me. What do you guys think? Do you guys think talking, thinking, and obsessing about certain things like this can draw them to you? I was driving home from work. I worked nights on an Air Force base and stopped by McDonald's to treat myself after my PT test. I had to drive extremely far from my home to find an open McDonald's at 2:14 in the morning, and when I finally found one, I was 30 minutes from home. After getting my food, I started driving home the entire way home. I felt an extreme existential dread, like something was off about the road I was on, and I felt like I was alone and would never see my wife again. I was on a stretch of highway with trees on both sides and 0 cars, passing about 10 minutes to driving with no cars. I saw a stoplight. The light was green, but there was a deer standing under light. It had been raining, and the puddle under the deer made it look like its legs had another joint where its feet should be, and that it was around a foot taller than it should have been. I hunt a lot, and I'm very familiar with how big deer get in this part. When I drove up on it, I realized it wasn't the reflection, and that was just how it was. It was all mutated looking. I went to drive around it. As soon as my front bumper got past the deer, my radio that had previously been playing music blasted static at max volume out of nowhere. I turned the radio off and floored it. When I turned around, the deer had been previously facing to the right, and it was now facing it, my car staring at it. But this time it was on his back, 2 legs. I went 20 over the speed limit on the way home, cut through privatized housing, and sped over all the speed bumps in the complex to get inside. By far the scariest thing that's happened to me, but I'm not too scared anymore considering that I haven't heard of skin whalers following people home. At least I hope not. This story isn't very long or exciting, but my friend was over at my house one night and we decided to go into the woods. The night wasn't very exciting except for some enormous spiders, which I love, but the next day was very different. We were invited to a house party, but my friend decided to leave it and go back into the woods for whatever reason. Once in there, he started exploring, and within a couple of minutes, the entire forest fell silent, which is often a sign of creatures being in the vicinity and off in the distance. He saw this tall thing that was lanky and had brown fur on parts of it. He swears he got it on video, but I don't have access to that video, so I don't really want to mention it. Oddly enough, his camera immediately distorted after the thing disappeared, and the camera was eternally stuck like that. I always hear screaming and strange whistling noises in my neighborhood, and it's always coming from the woods. I sometimes see this silhouette that does kind of look like a deer, but it's always way too tall to be one and standing on 2 feet. I don't want to say this is a Skywalker or a Wendy or a goat man or anything like that, because it's not sure. But if anybody has any idea, what could possibly be lurking in our woods that mimics voices and looks like a deer on 2 legs? Definitely let me know. Also, if it is a skinwalker, have you ever heard of them distorting and messing up? Electronics. There are dark secrets in every corner of this world, and to some it might be hard to imagine just how easily one's life can turn upside down, having been exposed to the horrors that are out there. My name is April. My mother named me after the month of spring, as she found it to be the most beautiful season to which I was described. For most of my life, I was never acknowledged by my peers for my intellect rather than my looks. I've had my fair share of passes from boys since high school, straight on to college. Never was the saying, boys only have one thing on their minds, any truer, until I experienced it firsthand. However, those moments made me focus even more on my academics to simply prove that I was more than just high candy, that I actually had a brain to suit. The day had finally come when I graduated from Arizona State University with my degree in business. Never was I happier to make myself and family proud, as I was now moving out of my own and having taken a job in the field. I so longed for having desired my own place. I moved into an apartment complex just in the suburban outskirt to the city. Nothing fancy, but a nice rural atmosphere with a great view of the desert. I moved into my 1B bedroom apartment mostly out of convenience, as it was less costly, and my parents were helping me with the first couple of months of rent until initial paychecks started coming in for my new job. This crazy encounter, and how would anybody believe it regardless of how sincere we are? Despite how confused and scared I was, this was the first thing all night that actually made sense. Who would believe a dog knocked the car off the road and then transformed into a man? Eric suggested that I don't return to my apartment tonight, and that he would give me a drive to my parents' place on the other side of town so I was safe. I agreed, but I still had questions. I knew Eric had been avoiding them, begging him to tell me the truth. As we were now driving into the populated areas, he finally opened up. He explained that what we encountered earlier was a skinwalker, an evil shapeshifter of Native American folklore that he was on the hunt for, hence the reasons he was armed with numerous weapons in his bag. The entity was stalking him for a while, and I just so happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, following him so far. I had to ask why such creature was after him. As it turned out, this was not Eric's first encounter with a skinwalker. For the first time, I saw genuine emotion from him as he confided to me that the creature was responsible for the disappearance and impossible murder of his girlfriend over a year ago. And despite it stalking him, he had been hunting it ever since. I saw the sadness and pain return to his expression, as I now understood the motive for everything he did that night. The very last thing I asked him was the name of the girl, and he lost, and he quietly responded by saying, "Cindy." I live in a pretty rural town in the southeast. There are only 2 highways leading in and out, and they pass through nothing but woods. It's quite hilly, and there are steep embankments on either side of the road, in fact. Most accidents in town occur when someone is going too fast around a curve and gets stuck at the bottom of the embankment. It's pretty serious when that happens, since no one can get up or down those crashes without extensive gear. Recently, my husband and I were driving home from visiting his family in a nearby town. It was pitch black in the dead of night. I think it was around 2 or 3 a.m. We were very close to our house off the highway when my husband spotted something on the side of the road. Its eyes glowed in the headlights, and it was walking up the embankment by the highway with ease. When we looked at the hill, we noticed it was one of those steep ones. People couldn't climb, no way. I don't think it chased us. Then again, I florried after seeing that took my roundabout way home too. Just in case. Does this sound like a Fleshgate or a Skywalker or a Wendy? I'm kind of freaking out. This happened back in 2018 in Western Kentucky, and for privacy's sake, I won't disclose a location or any of our names. My brother will be called G, and my grandpa will just call Pops every season. My grandfather, brother, and I would head up to a small hotel outside of a town. We would go frequently fishing around the bays and lakes there past nightfall. Around 11 p.m., one night when we were fishing for catfish, we let out a few fireworks before going back to the hotel to sleep. After letting out the fireworks, we heard some sort of demented scream across the water. The only road to where we were fishing was a small gravel road surrounded by dense woods. It wasn't uncommon to see deer or wildlife in the woods there, as there is a national park less than 5 miles away and very few people live around there. On the way back, we decide to stop and go stargaze them some 3 miles up the road in a small field. While stargazing, I saw a deer at the edge of the tree line across the field with my night fishing goggles. "Hey G," a deer where after he had asked, the deer started moving towards us across the field. "Skinwalker," he said. Now I don't doubt the existence of such creatures, but I haven't seen one, and I think immediately seeing a deer and freaking out and calling it a skinwalker is kind of lame, I said. "Wrong area, the Sky Whalers are from New Mexico." Pop said died. "Wrong area, the Sky Whalers are from New Mexico," Pop said. After looking back in the night, vision goggles. The deer was now about 100 yards away. It then stood up on its back legs, which really started to freak me out, and either G or Pops could actually see it. I think we should go ahead and go back to the Hotel AL right then. We got in the car and went down the road. As I looked out the rear of the windshield, I saw the damn thing standing straight up in the middle of the road. It was about 8 or so feet tall at least. That's my best guess. It quickly ran, and I mean, ran back to the field. After going back to the hotel, Jean and I were watching YouTube to know about midnights, and after turning on the lights and laying down, I swore I could see something out of the window. It definitely wasn't just a tree or a person, as there would be no trees around and we were on the 2nd floor. If you know anything about what we might have seen, I'd like to know after watching some YouTube videos. I reckon it might have been a Wendigo or a Skinwalker, but I'm not sure. So if you are even traveling in countryside at night, don't stop to do anything. You never know what you're going to see. This happened last summer. I just finished my freshman year in college. I am part of the Navajo tribe. After 6 hours of driving, I wanted to relax and hang out with my boyfriend, some of my friends and my family. My parents and some of my uncles were going to a peyote meeting that was an hour away from my house. I wanted to go, but I knew I couldn't stay up all night, so I planned to stay with my boyfriend, friends, and my younger siblings. We were going to plan to have a game night before my parents were about to leave. They called us and all the kids to the fireplace outside. They throw some cedar leaves in the fire as some pillar up in smoke. We bless ourselves for protection and harmony, and even though my boyfriend and friends weren't Navajo, they evenness themselves. We gave my parents hugs before they left, and they say we aren't going to be back until tomorrow, around noon after they left. I set up the PlayStation for my 2 younger siblings as they wanted to play Minecraft. My friends and my boyfriend were all playing cards. I led in my 3 dogs, a black deer-headed Chihuahua, a Basset Hound mix, and a Res dog mix. We just relax and play around when I noticed the dogs were on full alert with their ears pointing up and looking outside. I have a condition that if there is a strong spiritual pressure, my right hand trembled. It kind of feels like your arm falls asleep with non-stop shaking. My people called us the hand tremble. Then I heard a woman screaming and something crash. I got up and closed all the windows along with the curtains. As I was doing that, I saw someone standing before some of the cars. It had yellow eyes that glow in the dark. It seemed as though if it was peering into my soul. I shut the curtains quickly. My friends and little siblings were terrified. All I told them was that they can't enter the house, so we are fine. That's when I heard it calling my name, Josh. Come outside, we need to get hugs. I shake it off as it sounded like my mom. We are at home. Then it started to scream again, something between a coyote and a woman. After a couple of minutes of screaming, it stops. I got up to look around outside. There was a coyote circling among the cars, but it still had yellow eyes. As it moved from my car to my boyfriend's truck, I saw it get up and it was standing on its hind legs. I closed the window, suggested to everyone that we should head to bed as we were all going to sleep in the living room. So we got the mattress from my room and set it up in the living room. My little siblings were scared. I got up and on top of the door hangs a wooden lighter. I rub my hands and fingertips together with ash and walk toward my sibling and rub the ash on their forehead. Comfort and protection. After an hour, everyone was asleep when there was another crash. As a car long started to beep, I got up to look outside. It was my car and the back passenger window was busted. Right open the crap. I remember that I didn't take in any box from the dorm room and it was my hair brew. I was kind of freaked out. But my boyfriend wraps his body around me to try to calm me down. I went to the stove to burn sweetgrass and pray that nothing will happen to me. And I went into the living room and grabbed my backpack and ate some bitter powder. The next day, I told my parents about what had happened. They said that we should get a medicine man ASAP. He did a quick prayer and B blessed the house, my car, my siblings, friends, and my boyfriend. In the next upcoming day, I was feeling sick, not motivated, and becoming distant with everyone. I kept having terrible dreams, so my parents called the medicine man again. They did numerous protection prayers. The medicine man burned some cedar leaves in praise. As the fire burns down, he threw another handful of cedar leaves. He looked into the fire to see who did this. It turns out to be an ex-boyfriend from high school who got jealous of me, how I was successful and how my new relationship was better. The medicine man gave me some herb to burn and to make tea to help me, and put a protection prayer that anything that happens to me will be given back to the Skywalker that was hurting me in the Navajo way. That jealousy will have a negative impact on you and the person you are jealous of. It's very dangerous. The Skinwalker may pick up on that and put curses in order to get stronger. Let me begin with saying I was around 7. When this happened, I'm about to be 15, so I still have a very vivid memory of this occurrence. When I was younger, we used to travel a lot for my mom's work, particularly in our motorhome. We got to stay for free in campgrounds and take long national park vacations. At this time, we lived in Lake Havasu, Arizona, kind of irrelevant but a preface to the story. We went on a camping trip to the Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, and Petrified National Forest, sometime in 2010 or 2011. When we finished our Grand Canyon leg, we headed to the Navajo Nation to get to Monument Valley on the way. We stopped at a little roadside shop on a particularly desolate area of the highway. My mom and I purchased handmade juniper bracelets from a nice older lady there, as my parents and other assorted families pursued the shop. I talked to one of the forgers. She appeared to be the owner's daughter. I believe in her early 30s. She had overheard what route we were taking. I don't remember it if I'm honest, and told me to be very careful of a man that haunted the highway at nights. I haven't been able to find anything about it online. I'm very sure that she called him the White Walker, and no, I'm not thinking of Game of Thrones. She described him as an evil white man that stalks the highway at dusk and takes souls. It was a very creepy thing to me, especially since she had only told me and not my parents or anyone else. I thought she was trying to scare me at first, but she was very serious about it, not like she was just trying to entertain me a little bit. I didn't have an encounter that night, but you best believe I watched the road with eyes wide open the entire drive. It was very unsettling out there, and I'm usually at home and in the outdoors. Quite often, To be honest, it was just us and our clunky motor. We maybe be past 2 cars the entire drive. We had music playing loudly, but I could tell that if we stepped outside, the silence would engulf you. Please let me know if you have ever had an experience with this legend or know what kind of spirit or legend she was talking about. She never said Skinwalker and did not describe from what I've read a Skinwalker, but I can't be too sure. Thanks for listening to these creepy Wendigo and Skinwalker stories. Honestly, I hope I never experience one of these things while I'm out in Arizona or the Southeast. I will be visiting there quite a bit this year, so hopefully I'll be lucky enough not to see any of these things.